back at noon, honey.
All right.
Deep breaths, my friend.
I know, right?
Whew.
All right. We can.
What's the story you're telling yourself right now?
Fuck!
Hello, and welcome to Middleish, the podcast about moderation in all things. I'm Erin Green.
And I am Michael Gray.
And today is kind of like a Twilight Zone for us, isn't it?
It is a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're having a day. Both of us separately, individually, are having days. Yeah.
I know. That's the thing about COVID. It brings you together no matter how far apart you are. And
you bond through the pain.
So today we'll talk about rewriting the script in our heads, but maybe Michael and I should debrief a little bit for our internal scripts right now.
Right. You want to go first?
Sure. Mine I don't think is quite as traumatic as yours, but I think it's kind of interesting that we're both having plumbing issues and not bodily plumbing issues. Like both of our houses are messed up.
Right. Yes. Very curious. Frustrating.
And we've had a slow sink drain for, months now, and we rent our house. And so who knows, how long this has been going on. But we had a plumber come out and look at it, a couple weeks ago, and it was so noisy and distracting. And I work from home. So I was just like, oh man, I've got to plan this sometime when I have, maybe some busy work to do that doesn't take any mental capacity. So we've been trying to set this up with our landlord to come in and have a plumber come. And of course, Friday ends up being the day. Hey, can you have them come in? And it's been just this debacle to try and get them scheduled at the right time so that it's after we record this. And just as I was getting on with Michael, my husband comes tiptoeing through the room and is kind of waving at me and like trying to get my attention. And he's pointing out the window and the damn plumber is here 2 hours ahead of schedule. I'm like, what the hell's going on?
When are like maintenance people or that kind of stuff ever early? When are they ever early?
I know, when you don't want them to be. That's when they're early. Jeez.
Oh, man.
And we're under a little bit of a time crunch because you have...
Yeah, because I've got a general contractor coming here in a little over an hour. We've had a week. So Sunday or Monday, one of those, we noticed some water spots in our kitchen ceiling, and they were growing like every hour. It was like, yeah, they're definitely bigger.
Like a living organism.
Yes. And then just dealing with homeowners insurance and our home warranty company, who's just been a huge pain in the butt. And getting all kinds of people out here for bids and estimates and trying to get, damage stopped and all that kind of stuff. It's been a really stressful week for me. And then on top of that, one of my absolute least favorite things is to have to cancel things with people or even rearrange like with clients and stuff. I hate that because it's like we've set a time that works for them. And I don't want this to in any way be an imposition or, and I've had to reschedule and cancel a lot this week because we have people coming, like I got to cancel this session, can't do this video call because we got a guy coming, and I just hate that. So that's added to my stress. And yeah, and then we had to cancel this and then fit it in another time to record a different day. And it's been a week and I'm ready for, this week to be over, but yeah.
Well, and I noticed as Michael got on the video call with me, I was like, I can see the stress on your face, and it's taking the form of a mild goatee that's coming in.
I'm always pretty good about shaving before we do this. I didn't do a lot of the things that I do before we record this. I didn't shave. I didn't review like stuff we talked about near as much. Yeah, here we go.
It's all right. You're a professional. You can handle it.
Well, I'm something, and we're going to do this.
So this might be a decent segue into our topic today because I really think that what you tell yourself matters.
Mm-hmm.
And uh I like the phrase the story we tell ourselves, which I mean, I think of Brene Brown when I think of that, but I'm sure it's been used a
Mm-hmm.
lot, especially in psychology and behavior change. But this is a prime example. The things that are happening in our lives right now that are upending everything,
Mm-hmm.
especially for you, because this has been all week for you. You could easily just start telling yourself like this sucks, and I'm unprofessional because I'm having to
Mm-hmm.
uh, reschedule everything, and my house is in shambles, and this like it could be negative, 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 or I'm not able to do my work, or I'm not able to be an effective coach,
Mm-hmm.
or any of that stuff. Instead, you can flip it into, what can you do in this situation?
Mm-hmm. Were you in my head this week? Because that was
Maybe.
pretty accurate there, Erin.
We are in the twilight zone, Michael, so anything could happen, buddy.
Anything's possible, right? Yeah. Well, I think one, you're dead on, and that's a lot of the things that I was just cycling around in my head, you know, um, this week, and just kind of like, yeah, telling myself a lot of things that probably aren't true at all, because I know my clients well and I have good relationships with them, and they don't care. They're fine. Like, yeah, no
Yeah.
big deal. I'm really sorry that you're dealing with this. Go do what you need to do. We'll take care of this later. They're awesome like that. And so I know that what I'm telling myself in my head isn't what's happening in reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is what we do a lot, right? Like we spin these stories in our head that make us very sure of some things that may, like, if we could step back and look at things objectively, it's like that's not even close to the case. That's not at all what's happening. But we make these assumptions, and maybe we base it on past similar experiences, and so it's the same thing now, and we just take the past and put it on the present and just assume this is what it is, you know
Yeah. Yeah. And this
yeah.
is this is how it's going to play out. And
Yep.
I think another thing is kind of taking that maybe singular experience, or this 1 week of just chaos, and
Hmm.
turning it into uh, I'm a sucky person,
Hmm.
or I am a terrible coach, or I can't run my business, or
Hmm.
I'm a bad father, or like you turn it into like these
Hmm.
internalized kinds of things
For
instead,
sure.
and like put labels on yourself
Oh yeah.
instead of um, really just looking at the situation and saying, okay, this is what's happening, this is how I can choose to respond to it, which I
Hmm.
think is hard for people because we're very reactive a lot of times, right?
Hmm.
Like you have an emotional reaction or whatever. And it's hard to kind of talk your way through those emotions and understand how you're feeling that's kind of causing the reaction, and then causing you to label yourself as such,
Right.
versus really taking a look from the outside in.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So it would be nice to have, you know, somebody maybe be in your head that's the voice of reason.
Right. Well, that was my wife a little bit this week, and we'll talk about that later when we get to the mean and the mundane. But yeah, yeah, I definitely I got spinning in a nasty cycle for about 3 days, of just kind of downward, and yeah, and everything just got uglier, and I just started, you know, being not very kind to myself, for
Yeah.
sure, and it's because it's just I was making assumptions, and of how things were going to play out, and what my wife stays home. She works a few days a month, but for the most part, I'm the primary provider. And so I'm thinking about like, what are her assumptions about me and how we're going to pay for this and how I provide, just all this stuff that she's like, I'm not
Yeah.
thinking that stuff, like, I don't care. We're
Yeah.
going to be fine, you know? But yeah, it was a lot of assumptions. It was a lot of probably my own issues within myself that I'm projecting onto other people, and that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. And I think there was definitely some falling into some old patterns that I've tried to get out of, some old scripts, or stories that I've told myself in the past. And maybe that's why this happened. So we had this really great illustration for this.
So we can live it and
Right,
have some
exactly.
experiences to share. And what you're
Yeah.
describing is something that I see a lot in clients.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I was thinking this morning, I went for a swim with some friends, which I just don't do a whole lot of anymore because of the,
Mm-hmm.
the whole shutdown situation, but also just being retired from triathlon. And it gives my brain a nice space to just
Sure.
relax and think.
Yeah.
And I was thinking how relatable it can be to go through situations like this
Mm-hmm.
or anything and, you know, talk through clients in that same kind of space and that same understanding and know that this is kind of the script that's going on in your head. And I
Right.
get what that feels like. I get what it feels like to be overwhelmed and to feel like you're not going to succeed and to feel like this is how it always plays out. Um, Regardless of the situation, if you've been through that, your feelings are the same.
Mm-hmm.
We know what it feels like to
For
have those
sure.
things.
Yeah.
And then you can practice what you preach a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but then also share that experience with clients and say, like, this is what worked for me, or, I totally get it. Sometimes it's
Mm-hmm.
just the um, kind of having that person to lament with you a little bit and be like, oh, I
Yep.
totally get it. Yeah.
Yep.
Like your
Well,
partner who has plumbing issues in her house too. It's kind of
right.
funny.
Yeah. Well, and I think it just goes to show it's just like, I think a lot of times this isn't directly related to today, but I have a second point that is, but um, I think it can be easy for people to make assumptions about coaches, right? That like we've got it all together and, we never eat any sugar and we never, like get off track and we never like phone it in for a workout. And it's like, that's not true at all. Maybe we do it less, maybe, you know, but it's like that's part of being human. That's part of this journey. And I think it's something we've said on here before. It's like getting further down the journey doesn't necessarily mean that you have these hangups less, or these roadblocks less. It may, but it doesn't guarantee that. I think what being further down the journey probably does mean is we handle them better. They derail us for a shorter amount of time. We get back on track easier, or that kind of stuff. I think so often people look at someone who is quote unquote more successful than them, whatever that means to them, further down the road, somewhere they want to be, whether that's health wise, physically, whatever. And they make assumptions that, well, they must never, have a piece of cake at a birthday party, or
Right.
when they go to, a barbecue with friends, they must like bring their own food. And I just need, and it's like, no, it's they probably just enjoy that stuff and get back on it, shrug it off, and, oh, okay, fine. I'm going to a barbecue. I'm going to eat what I want, and I'm going to be fine. Or you know what, man, I really ate that ice cream last night without any kind of mindfulness, and I was emotionally eating, and I didn't do what I had planned for. But oh well, okay, back at it.
Yeah.
And I
Allows
think,
some flexibility.
yeah,
Mhm.
I think that's more of um, how people are more successful. Is that this? It's that they've strengthened that get back at it muscle. you
Mhm.
know they realize what's done is done. I can't do anything about it. I can beat myself up, but all that does is start this script that's ugly and undoes everything I've been doing and puts me back to where I started. Or I can go, okay, let's respond differently than I usually do, and just shrug it off and move forward you know
Yeah. So I'm curious, as you're kind of going through this yourself with
hmm
with some situations this week, what are some things that you tend to tell clients when they're experiencing that um that spiral or that
hmm
negative script, or this is how it always happens, or this is the type of person I am? What
hmm
kinds of strategies or what things do you talk about to try and change the script?
um, I think I think one of the biggest things is first just kind of acknowledging what's happening, like recognizing that this is what's going on. Um, and so to ask them things like, so have you said this before? Have you used these terms about yourself before? Have you felt these feelings about yourself before? Right. And if so, like once, or has this been a common theme when you've made attempts and come up against a similar kind of like roadblock or hurdle or whatever? And usually, I think the case is, yeah, I've done this before and I've done this a lot. This isn't a foreign thing. And I
Hmm.
think starting there with acknowledging, like, okay, so if we've done this before, maybe several times, there's a pattern here, right? We get to a certain place, we get to a certain hurdle, and we go, okay, pause this, hit play on this sort of message that I'm really familiar with the script, right? So I think acknowledging that is really key to start. And then I like to look at, do those things line up with how you feel like you've been progressing with the work you've been doing, you know? And sometimes people may be at a place where they're able to see that, sometimes not, right? And I think that's where it can be really important as a coach to say, well, here's what I've seen from you in the last, few months we've worked together. Here's what I've seen that counters, that is directly in opposition to these things that you're saying. Here's what I've seen. Do you see those things now that I've said them? And usually a lot of times people are like, yeah, I do. Or a lot of times it's yeah, but, we get the yeah, buts,
Yeah.
which is fine. I think that's okay. An okay place to start, because then we can address the buts. You know what I mean? But if they can at least like acknowledge them and be like, yeah, I can see that. Then I think like this rewriting the script is not a quick process. It's not like, okay,
No.
let's have a conversation and now you're going to be fine. So I think any kind of movement towards saying something different, recognizing that things are maybe a little bit different, are really good steps in the right direction. So even if it's met with like, yeah, buts, great. We got the yeah, right? We got the, we can see that
Yeah.
like, yeah, sure. I can see some of those things.
Yeah, we at least got the acknowledgement. And so there were two things that you said there. One, I think, is what you're describing is building the awareness around our thinking and our inner script. And I will tell people that all the time. Your thoughts and what you say to yourself matters. What you tell yourself about this food or this eating pattern or this approach to exercise, the way you talk to yourself about that thing really matters. But most people don't realize the way they talk about the thing, like how they're saying it. And so what you're describing is kind of listening for that inner script and listening for people to, and sometimes I'll even ask clients, what was going through your mind as this was happening? Or, man, it sounds like a tough situation. What kinds of things did you tell yourself about that? Or what would be going through your head in that moment? And many times people can articulate that, but they have to stop and think about it and recognize it. And sometimes it's really hard for people to articulate because they just, again, it's kind of that reaction and they don't really think about the words they're using to tell themselves. But when you build that awareness and like when you're saying, okay, I'm hearing this theme, or I've seen this in you before, we've talked about this before, and this seems to be kind of a recurring pattern, then you're bringing that to the forefront so people can then recognize it and become more aware. I mean, it's just like I was listening to one of our previous episodes where if somebody catches themselves in the middle of, say, eating something they didn't plan on eating, or mindlessly doing something, and they're like, oh dang it, I totally screwed up because here I am doing this thing I plan not to do. And you and I are both like, well, wait, you caught it,
yay,
though.
Yay.
Yeah, this is like celebration worthy. So for me, this is a similar kind of thing, only you're becoming more aware of your inner monologue and maybe the words you use to describe this in your own mind,
right,
versus the behavior.
Right. Yeah, I think that, and we've said this before, but kind of what you're saying, but that awareness often works backwards through the habit or the routine. And it usually starts afterwards. And we have to acknowledge it afterwards before we can acknowledge it in the middle. And we have to acknowledge it in the middle of it before we can see it coming, And yeah, then it's just funny how sometimes clients are like, wow, I really screwed it up. And we're going, no, this is a huge win. I'm really excited right now because you recognized it. I don't care that you ate, the whole half gallon of ice cream.
Right.
Afterwards, you're like, oh, wait, I'm doing the thing. This is a success. This is a win. And we need to celebrate that. Yeah, it's very exciting. Yeah.
And I think one of the tough things about rewriting the script is that people, I get pushback from clients sometimes who are like, well, I could say that to myself, but I don't believe it. I could tell myself that I'm successful, but I don't believe it. Or I could tell myself I'm not disappointed or this is a good learning experience, but that's not true because I'm really
Mm-hmm.
pissed about this thing that I just did and I can do
Mm-hmm.
better. Um, I really believe, though, again, the words matter.
Mm-hmm.
What you tell yourself matters.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can acknowledge that you're whatever, disappointed, you didn't do what you set out to do, um, I've had clients that are working on, maybe fueling for sport, and so they're very focused on like their meal patterns, and they're packing snacks to work and being prepared and all this stuff, and then they have a lapse in it, and they're just like, dang it, everything just went out the window. I suck
Mm-hmm.
and I can't do it and blah blah blah, and I need to do better, and they kind of start berating themselves. If we work on kind of flipping what you tell yourself about that situation, and maybe how you can reframe that in your mind into, okay, acknowledge that you didn't do what you set out to do, and then
Mm-hmm.
tell yourself what you can
Yeah.
do next time, or maybe what good comes out of this learning experience, or where
Mm-hmm.
did things go wrong, where did you
Mm-hmm.
not execute what you plan to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can kind of talk your way through that in a manner, I have seen it work for people where they suddenly, like, I'll get a text and be like, oh my gosh, I, I told myself this. I heard your voice in my head. I
Mm-hmm.
changed the way I told myself about this, and it actually worked. Like they felt the change in their, um, it just in the way they felt and their stress level around that situation. And then they felt empowered to actually do something differently the
Mm-hmm.
next time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's just, I mean, one, it's like when someone says, well, I don't believe that. It's like, yeah, I know you don't.
Yeah.
That's why we're here. You know what I mean? If you believe that, we wouldn't be here, right? You believe the other thing you're telling yourself. But then also, I think it's easy for people to feel like their experience or their what they're feeling has to be like a singular thing, right?
Mm.
And so I'll come back to this. I'm gonna tell you a quick story. So I don't think I've told this on here. This is probably
Good. We like
two,
stories.
3 months ago, maybe 4 months ago. Anyway, so this was when we were after schools had shut down, right? Doing school work at home last spring. So maybe, I don't know, maybe it was April or something like that. And Lila has, like 30 minutes of reading to do a day. My oldest daughter, she's 9, 8 at the time, 9 now. So she's going through, like, they have this app that they can use for books, and they're supposed to be like grade level appropriate. So she's reading 3 different books to get her 30 minutes in a day. And she picks this one about ghosts, right? It's not grade level appropriate. Like, it's talking about like this house is haunted because this mom killed her 2 kids and cut their heads off. And I'm
Oh
like,
my goodness.
what? Why is this in like a 3rd grade reading thing? Right.
Whoa.
Anyway, so of course she's now freaked out about ghosts, right? Like, not sleeping well, us having to stay in the room with her. She's just terrified, understandably, right? Like, I mean, yeah. So anyway, throughout that process we like, we called it like practicing bravery. Like, we're going to practice
Mm.
bravery, right? Like, I want you to practice being brave. I want you to be able to go upstairs by yourself and grab your clothes. You can come down and change down here. Just go up and grab them and run back down, right? Like, practice being brave. And let's do it a little bit more. But through these conversations, I would say to her a lot, like, you can be scared and safe. You can be
Mm.
scared and brave, right? Like, you can be both of these things that seem to
That's so
be
good.
an
Yeah.
opposition. It's that you know, and I think that's the same thing with clients. You could be disappointed and pissed off with yourself and recognize that maybe there's some benefit in what happened, right? You can be frustrated and recognize that, yeah, maybe this is something that I need to let go of because I have been telling myself that a lot. And so I think realizing that it doesn't have to be one thing, it can be
Mm-hmm.
a couple things, even if they seem like they might be opposites, right? Like, Lila can be scared, but also be safe. She can be scared, but also be brave. Those things seem
Yeah.
like maybe they're in opposition. And I think, if we can recognize that, we can be like, was it Henry David Thoreau, I think, or maybe Walt Whitman, someone that said something like, I am multitudes. I contradict myself a lot. Like, we can be these things as we're going through this process that seem to be in opposition. And maybe there's some real benefit in recognizing those kind of seemingly opposing things.
Yeah. And I think that also gives you a bit of a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Which one do I want to give a little more life to and give a
Right.
little more power to?
Yep.
So it's not denying the
Mm-hmm.
way you feel about something, and it's not trying to convince yourself of something that's not, quite real. Although sometimes I think it does help to sort of maybe talk your way through, this is how I want to approach this situation. How do I get there? But what you're describing is a perfect example of how we can, again, sort of reflect back to a client. Okay, we're in this situation and we hear this a lot, this pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm also hearing that you did this thing or you thought this other thought that was helpful, and I'll pick those out for clients so that if they don't recognize it and build awareness around it, at least I can, and
Right.
reflect it back to them.
Right.
In fact, I had a conversation with a client just this morning where this person is looking, I mean, of course, times of pandemic, everything is like up in the air, and making
Right.
plans is like, who even
Yeah.
knows? Um, and there's so much out of our control that this person is looking at possibly changing jobs, moving to a new place,
Mm-hmm.
basically like rewriting her life and her lifestyle. And it's really challenging for her to approach that. And historically, she's approached it with a negative control space around food. That's been a coping mechanism. So we kind of talked through this, and I loved what she was saying, that like she is aware of that, first of all, this whole like negative coping mechanism surrounding food. This is the thing I can control, so I'm going to hyper control it. She also started looking at this potential life shift as it could be a positive thing. And actually, in this situation where there's a lot of stuff that's out of my control, this could be a thing that's within my control. Like I just can roll
Right.
with it, you know?
Right.
I think that shift, and just watching her facial expression and her posture change as she kind of talked through all this with me, I'm like, I'm no therapist. Like, we're here to talk about food and stuff, but we're also here to talk about life and decision making and kind of feelings and how it all relates to overall health.
Right.
So it's super cool when you can see a client talk themselves through that. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll often ask people if they are not getting to that space where they can flip it to a positive perspective or a
Mm-hmm.
helpful perspective. I'll ask, is that thought helpful for you?
Mm-hmm.
I just heard you say this, that you think you'll never be able to uh, lose weight, or you feel like you'll never learn how to cook. Is that a helpful thought?
Right.
And most of the times they're like, well, not really.
Right.
It's just realistic. Okay, well, let's be realistic. But then how can we reframe that into something that's helpful?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or is that even realistic? Like
Yeah.
I think it's easy to believe it's realistic because that's what we've told ourselves over
Hmm.
and over and over, you know. Um, and I think this is, you know, I think this is why there's can be such benefit, and maybe this is a shameless plug for us, but in working with a coach, is because you have someone who's um, like can see things from a different perspective, has experience seeing these things from a different perspective, and isn't as emotionally attached as maybe a friend or a spouse or someone would be, right? Like sometimes having that distance really helps a lot when you're looking at trying to be,
Yeah.
unbiased with things. And I think to have somebody in your corner that can look at things and go, like, I recognize that, but there's also all these other things that you've got to acknowledge because they're happening just as much in reality, or maybe more so, as the things you keep telling yourself, you know, and you've got to see those too and acknowledge them. Even if you don't own them yet, you, we've got to acknowledge that they're there. I see them. Do you see them? And
Hmm.
it's usually, yeah, okay, I see them, and again, that's where those yeah buts come in a lot. Well, yeah, but,
Right.
but we've got to recognize, and I think this comes back to something we've said a lot, is like celebrating those little wins.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? It's, yeah, we're going to celebrate that after you ate the half gallon of ice cream, you went, oh, I didn't do the thing I was supposed to do beforehand. That's important,
Yeah.
right? And the more we can see that successes are happening all around us, little tiny ways, most days, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
As opposed to denying those and having this undercurrent of thought of, boy, it's probably going to be another just failed attempt, you know, da, 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 da. Or I only did, 15 minutes of walking and I said I was going to do 20. And so I screwed up there. And, there's this, I think a lot of times clients have this undercurrent of just this crap that they're just feeding themselves and rehearsing. And it's that script that they're just, this is what I do. And this is what I say. And this is who I am. And this is my experience. And this is my attempt every single time. And there's just no light being shown on, but what are you doing? Not who are you in this experience even, or what are you going to do? How is this going to play out? But what are you actually doing on a daily basis, right? Okay, so you're supposed to get 20 minutes of walking. You only did 15. You did 15.
Yeah.
Is that more than you were doing 3 weeks ago before we started working
Right.
together? That's great. This is good, right? This is doing something different, and it's doing something counter to what you keep telling yourself. So let's shine some light on it. Let's acknowledge it, and let's start to build some trust in yourself that you are doing things that are counter to the script that you tend to follow.
Yeah. And along those lines, if people sometimes that mental kind of monologue is what's standing in the way of actually taking action and doing things. So sometimes I'll um, approach it from, what can you do? What do you want to do? What will you do? So changing those words, I don't like the word should or shouldn't, because it's a judgment, and it's usually based on some external comparison or expectation that someone else has of you or that you have of yourself. And so then changing that to, I will do this, or I want to do this, or I can do this, is much more empowering, and it's much more actionable. Where should and shouldn't, I mean, I think of it like a quagmire, like it just sticks you in this horrible place of like, I'm failing, I suck. I should be doing all these things, or I shouldn't be doing that, instead of saying like, I can, I will, I won't, those kinds of things.
Absolutely.
So again, the word choice I think is important.
Absolutely. And I think it changes how we see ourselves within the script. So we've referenced this before, but Atomic Habits by James Clear, which again, great book. I would recommend it to anybody. Just kind of the power of small changes and how those build exponentially. He talks about if someone's attempting to quit smoking, if they say, I'm trying to quit smoking versus like, I used to be a smoker, right? Like, how do I identify myself? Or I am quitting smoking. Not like, well, I'm trying to be this different thing. I'm a smoker, but I'm trying to be something else, versus like, no, that's what I used to be. And this is who I am now. This is who I'm identifying with. And identifying as a non-smoker doesn't mean maybe you never smoke anymore, right? Like maybe you still do some, but you're identifying as something different, and kind of like shedding those old clothes and putting on new ones, right? Like, I used to be that, but I'm this now, versus like, well, I'm still this, but man, I'm trying to be something different.
Yeah.
That sounds promising.
That trying is a sticky one too. I'll often catch people and just ask them, tell me more about the try part. You say you try to eat more vegetables. You say you try to drink less in the evenings. You say you try to get to the gym 4 days a week. Tell me more about the try. What part of that is trying? And really getting them to kind of piece that apart and say, well, this is actually what's happening, or this is actually what I'm telling myself about these situations, or I want to. And then you start getting that kind of talk where they change, I want to do this, or I have done this, or I'm not doing this, I'm not setting my alarm, or whatever. And so all of a sudden you come from this space of like that trying and shouldn't sort of like icky, like not changeable kind of, but like a kind of negative look at things, to all of a sudden it's actionable, and empowering for the person.
Yeah. It's like Yoda, right? Do or do not. There is no try.
I know.
And I think that's often the case. It's like, I'm trying to eat more vegetables. Okay, let's look at what you've done this week. Have you eaten more vegetables? Yes. Then you're doing it. You're not trying, you're already doing it. And I think we discount our efforts way too often, because for whatever reason, we have these limited thoughts that we can be that person or we can make that change. And maybe it's because we've had, attempt after attempt after attempt that we feel like has failed or we haven't followed through with or whatever. And so we really don't feel like we can be that. But a lot of times when people say, I'm trying, they're actually already doing,
Yeah.
and that's really important. Now, is it doing as much as you'd like? Maybe not. That's okay, but you're still doing it. You're not trying, you're doing,
Yeah.
and it's a
Yeah.
really important distinction to make, I think, when someone is trying to, right, is in the process of changing their habits and their behaviors and routines.
Yeah. And I think this, the word choice that we use and the way we describe our thoughts reminds me of our conversation with Brian Fretwell, which was a few episodes ago, where he points out that, our subconscious and our part of our brain that's always identifying threat and is kind
Mhm.
of like reactive is in control most of the time. And so the reason it's so hard to come up with these conscious thoughts and actions and sort of look at things a little bit more reasonably
Mhm.
um, is it takes a lot of effort. You have to like change the way you have to kind of stop and recognize it in the moment and then start talking your way through or changing the way you think. And for me that comes into sort of words. Like
Mhm.
what kinds of words can I use to, because words are very I mean, for me, it's very relatable and descriptive, and I can actually put a name to something and sort of think through it and use some words that,
Mhm.
can actually change the thought and also change the feelings. Like again, watching somebody's posture change or their facial expression when you start using words that actually, speak to
Mhm.
where they want to go or things
Right.
that they do have control over. But it takes a lot of effort, and
It
we all
does.
catch ourselves doing it, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
for
just like
sure.
we were talking at the very beginning here, how you and I still, we're human. We go through
Yeah.
this too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I really like the illustration of like, and we use the term script. So let's use like that illustration, right? Let's say like a playwright, okay? And he's written a play, and there's this act or scene that they don't like, right? Well, every time that play is performed, the act or scene is going to be the same,
Mhm.
unless you do the hard work of going like, all right, I got to scrap some stuff. I got to get rid of some things, and I've got to write something different. That's going to take more work than just doing the same play over and over. But if you do the same play over and over and you don't like it or it doesn't yield the result that you're wanting, why would you keep doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going
Definition of
to,
insanity.
right? It's going to
Right.
be more work to go like, all right, let's put this on hold. I've got to make some major changes. I've got to go back to the drawing board. I've got to throw some things out. I've got to elaborate here. I've got to really do some thinking and some processing and figure out what's not working and what is, and figure out how do I rewrite this in a way that yields the result I want. That's a lot harder than just following the script that's already finished. Yes, it's hard, right? If it was easy, nobody would have any issues.
Louder for those in the
you
back,
know,
Michael.
right? It's hard work. It is. That doesn't mean that you can't do it. It doesn't mean that
Hmm.
it doesn't have value. In fact, I think most of the times the hard work has more value than the easy work, right? But you've got to take the time and be willing to kind of take a step back and shed some things and go, how do I rewrite this in a way that gets me to where I want to be? Not just with my weight, not my dress size, but as a human being. Like, what are the things I want to say to myself? Who do I want to be in this world? And what kind of confidence and self assuredness do I want to have? Yeah, it's going to be a lot of work. You're going to have to take some time to undo some things. But if you don't do that, you're never going to get there.
Yeah. And I think something you just said, it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many times I think it's important to acknowledge those things and be realistic. Um, Saying something is hard, or I'm having trouble with this, or this is challenging, or I need to focus better. I mean, man, when I was racing professionally, and even now when I go out for hard workouts or something, I will talk my way through some things like,
Mm-hmm.
man, I'm on the rivet here. Like this is,
Mm-hmm.
taking everything I have, or, oh man, this is really hard, or, um, hey, I'm not very focused. So acknowledging those
Yeah.
things and giving them kind of a name, and then what can I do about it?
Right.
Stay with it. I mean, sometimes it's just like giving yourself a little pep talk. And I think I've mentioned this before. Sometimes I'll use strategies like, what would you tell a best friend, or what would you tell your mom or your daughter, or what would you tell your dad in this situation if they're being really hard on themselves and thinking negatively? How might you look at that and turn it into a positive,
Yeah.
um, so again, I think it's okay to say like, this is really hard, or
Mhm.
this has been such a challenging week. I'm really overwhelmed. And it's okay to just sit with that. You don't automatically have to flip it into, I mean, we're not talking about being Pollyanna and
Right.
flipping things into a sudden actionable or positive kind of
Mhm.
thing. I think it is important to be aware of your words
Mhm.
that are going on in your head and
Absolutely.
acknowledge them, um, and be aware of when that transition happens, when you take something that's really hard or really
Mhm.
sucky and you turn it into something,
Mhm.
um, that's
Yeah,
helpful.
it is. And I had a phone call with a client. I don't know if it was this week or maybe it was the end of last week, but she said something and I wrote it down just because I loved it. She said, "I can do the hard thing." Right. So if you're listening, guess what? You can do hard things. Like just because something's hard doesn't mean it's something to shy away from or to like shrink under. And it might be worth asking yourself, how has doing the easy thing worked out for me?
Yeah.
How has like comfort and ease played out, and where has it gotten you? There's probably a good chance it hasn't gotten you anywhere that you're wanting to go, right? Because the things that we already have established in our lives, the routines and the habits and the behaviors are easy. Their effects may not be easy, right? Like if it's hard on your body or you feel like crap, or if there's negative health effects, that may not be easy. But to go through your day following those things, piece of cake. You don't even have to think about it. But to do the hard thing, it takes a lot of conscious effort. It takes a lot of awareness. It takes a lot of screwing it up and trying again. But that doesn't mean it's not worth it. In fact, like I said earlier, I think it means it's incredibly valuable. And then once we do a hard thing, we kind of have this like, oh, maybe I can do another hard thing. Maybe I've built some resilience up and some grit. And I think that's something that doesn't get talked a lot about in this process. You build discipline and grit and strength and the ability to persevere, right? And understand that, oh, I'm not going to shrink doing something hard. I can handle it. It may push
Yeah.
me and it may stretch me, but I come out stronger and I come out better and I come out like more resilient in this world. That's a good thing. You need to do that if you want to keep pushing forward, right? You can't continue to do the easy things that you've been doing because that's not going to get you anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Like we can't shrink from the hard things.
Do you think that a lot of this comes from fear? I mean,
Yeah, I
I'm sure there's a
probably.
lot of different emotions, but I
Yeah.
think I was just having a flashback to my days of teaching swimming lessons, which I
Hmm.
did all through high school and college. I teach all ages.
Hmm.
And I just am thinking about the glee that I would see on a kid's face
Yeah.
when they did anything that took them a lot of effort, and it's the hard thing for them. So
Hmm.
for some kids it was blowing bubbles, like literally putting their face in the water and blowing bubbles was like super hard.
Hmm.
And some kids it was diving, they'd
Hmm.
pull their head up and they'd
Yeah.
belly flop, or they'd whatever, chicken out, and they just jump in feet
Yeah.
first. um, and I was thinking about that and how you're talking about doing the hard thing, um, when you're teaching somebody something new, especially, I mean, swimming and water is not everybody is comfortable in the water. In fact,
Sure.
most people, when I tell them about triathlon, they're like, oh, if not for the swim, I would do triathlon.
Hmm.
Um, so when I think of putting a child or anybody who's learning a new skill in the water, it kind of heightens that this is really hard because it's scary. So
Sure.
that fear comes into things. And I was just kind of wondering your idea of, do you think it's fear based, or do you think there, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of emotions that could be working through there, but
Yeah, I would say probably a lot. I mean, this is a guess, but I think probably a lot of it is fear. And where that fear comes from maybe a variety of places. Maybe there's probably, fear of like other people's judgments on me if I
Mm,
attempt and fail. Fear of being this is quotations, this isn't me saying this, right? But like being the same person I've always been, right?
yeah.
Like following into that same pattern, even though I think we often fall into it willingly for comfort, we also fear following into the same pattern. But of being disappointed in ourselves, or fear of making an attempt and quote unquote reaffirming these quote unquote truths that we hold about ourselves. So I think that's probably, I would say that's at least a lot of it, I would think. But the funny thing about that is, again, I'm going to use my kids, like Sophie, she'll be 4 in a few months, like jumping off of like our little plastic picnic bench we have in the backyard, right? It's like 2 feet. She'll be fine. You know what I mean? But the first time she did that, it was like, oh, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. And then when she did it, she realized, oh, that's it. I can do this. I can do it again. And I
Yeah.
think that's something really important, that when we do a hard thing, it's not like it takes the same amount of courage to do it again. It's actually
Yes.
easier the second time and easier the third time. And at that point, it may just be like, okay, there's nothing to be scared of here at all. I can totally do this. In fact, it's not
Yeah.
even hard. I think a lot of the times those hard things aren't actually even hard. We've just built them so much in our head that we know they're going to be hard. And then we do them and it's like, oh yeah, that was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's a good point. Again, back to triathlon for me, because so much of it was mental and controlling the script in my head and the words I
Mm-hmm.
used. There were so many times that I would talk myself through something and say, I've seen this before. Like I've been through this before. I've been through a hard workout. I've been
Mm-hmm.
through um, a bonk in the middle of an Ironman run.
Mm-hmm.
I've been through dropping a bottle on the course and having to rethink my nutrition or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So once you're exactly right, like once you've experienced it, and experience is one of our most powerful tools when it comes
Yeah,
to learning things, and also kind of how we relate our actions and our behavior to um,
absolutely.
things that have happened before. So once you have experienced that, once you have, and I think that's working with our clients, that's one of the things that is maybe challenging to get them to appreciate that you
Mm-hmm.
have done this before, or
Mm-hmm.
you are doing this. So if you
Yeah.
did, set your alarm and you got up and went to the gym and you had this like great pattern of like getting your workouts done,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden there's this, oh, I'm too tired, or I'm not setting my alarm, I've got too much going on, I can't do this, and that
Right.
script starts kicking in, you
Right.
can then point out, actually, you've been through this before, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did you handle it before? What worked for you? And again, most people are the experts in their own,
Yeah.
behavior change and their own belief systems and
Mm-hmm.
how it works for them. So if you can just kind of tease it out and say, you've been through this before, how did
Right.
you approach it? What things worked for you?
Yeah.
That's a really powerful tool too.
Absolutely. I like that a lot. And that just gave me this thought that if we only experience the same things we've already experienced, like where does that keep us? It
Mm,
it, it reaffirms what we already believe about ourselves, true or not, right? It just kind of like pigeonholes us into this small version of ourselves, I think, or at least like a truncated version, like our wings are clipped. We're a bird, but our wings are clipped and we did it ourselves, you know, versus if we want to understand ourselves any differently, if we want to understand the world any differently, if we want to step into any kind of new space at all, we have to have a different experience, and sometimes that may be like an experience out here, it may be an experience in here with the same old situation, but I went through it differently. I told
mhm.
myself different things, I saw different things, I was aware of different things, or I was more mindful of things. That experience, even if externally it's the same thing, that can be a different experience as well. And we have to have new experiences, we have to expose ourselves to them, I think, to understand that we can be something else. We can
Yeah.
be a stronger version. We can be a more resilient version. We can be a happier version. We can be a version of
Yeah.
ourselves that believes in us. But we've got to have different experiences, because if you only have the same experiences, then all you're like in an echo chamber with yourself of saying, this is all I am, this is all I'll ever be, and this is what life is, and this is how I relate to it. And that's it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that goes back to what's the story you tell
Hmm.
yourself about
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And I'll even take that like with just daily incidents or something where I'm like, okay, what, because sometimes we can just weave something into our own minds. Just like you were saying at the beginning of this with Kat, and she's
Hmm.
like, no, I'm not thinking about that at all. But you
Hmm.
had told yourself this story
Yeah.
that you assumed that this person was thinking this about you, or that this is how your actions are being perceived. um, so I think that's a really powerful question. The story I'm telling myself, what's the story I'm telling myself about this?
Yeah.
um, and also catching those I try, or I'm trying, or I should or shouldn't,
Hmm.
catching that language and reframing
Hmm.
that, and turning things into a little more positive and actionable things. I
Yeah.
think journaling is super helpful for this,
Hmm.
just to get some thoughts out on paper, and then you can read it and look at the words you're using, and all of a sudden I mean, you have evidence of it. It's
Right.
very different if you're speaking it, because you can
Right.
kind of forget or overlook some of the words
Hmm.
you use.
Hmm.
um, but then when it's on paper, man, it's there.
Yeah.
So that's a really
Documented.
useful yes, I know.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. It is. I like to have people write things down when we're talking about this stuff,
Hmm.
because of that very reason. It's easy to say something and either miss the beauty of it or miss the script. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But if it's written down, we can analyze it. We can come back to it a few days later and look at it again. We can sit with it a little better. Yeah, I think that's a great tool. I really
Yeah.
like that one.
So I feel like we've kind of gone through this. I don't have any. Do you have any more thoughts to add?
Just one.
Go for it.
So there's this quote that I really like that I've said a lot, and I'll probably still keep saying a lot. And it's that the best predictors of future behavior are past behavior. Or how I like to say it, you're probably going to keep doing what you've already been doing.
Mm,
And putting it in those terms, I think it's just important. So if you want to do something different, you got to do something different, and that seems like a well, duh kind of thing and very obvious.
it's very profound, Michael.
Right, right. It's almost like a stupid thing to say, but at the same time, I think it's almost an elusive concept. Like if you want your future behaviors to be different, then you have to change the ones you're doing now. You have to. You can wish all you want and make plans all you want, but if you don't enact them, if you don't like take action on something in the now, then your future behaviors probably aren't going to be any different. And so like all you're doing is losing time.
Yeah.
Like you're wishing and you're well, maybe next week or maybe at the new year, or like all you're doing is losing time. Like nothing is going to be different about whenever you decide to give it a shot at all until you start changing your behaviors now. And then guess what? You change your behaviors in the now, you're likely that your future behaviors are going to be different,
Yeah.
because your future behaviors are dependent on your past behaviors, and your past behaviors are the ones that you're doing in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's what you've always been doing. And
that was my
and
last thought.
again, words have power.
Mm-hmm.
So, to Michael's point, if you're wanting to make a change, you're kind of looking, you know, um i- into this vision of a future version of yourself, then think about how you talk to yourself about that
Mm-hmm.
future person or about that change,
Mm-hmm.
and think about how you talk to yourself about what is happening right now and your
Yeah.
current behaviors. And words and thought have power, you
Mm-hmm.
guys. So
A lot. A
see
lot.
see what you can do to rewrite that script.
Rewrite the script. Yep. Learn the
Yeah.
lessons from the old script, and rewrite it. Do the work. Do the hard thing, you know, because there's a lot of
Yeah.
beauty in doing the hard things, and there's
Hmm.
a lot of reward on the other side.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Good stuff.
All right. So you got
All
a mean and a
right.
mundane, or you want me to go?
I do. I have one. I have a good one actually. I'm
Well,
not
good. It's
sure.
about time you have a good one. I'm just kidding.
I know mine have all been,
No, yours are
yeah.
always great.
Um, so for those of you who listen to episode 10, you will notice that we had some audio trouble.
Mhm.
And I didn't, first of all, I have to say thank you so much to Lance Davison for coming on and
Yep.
being a guest. I love his perspective and his energy. And I thought it was such a great conversation. That being said, the audio was really messed up and it was my mic. So I texted Michael after and I was like, I feel like I made yellow curry that was terrible, like from your meeting in the mundane.
Right?
So I actually had a really hard time with that because
Mhm.
I felt like I ruined this really great episode. And it wasn't just me and Michael, we had a guest.
Yeah.
So it was like this failure all around on me. And I just carried it with me. I mean, there were a few other things that kind of hung on me that day, but I just was having a really hard time letting it go. Even though my partner, thank you, did a really great job with, trying to edit and calm me down too and be like, it really isn't that bad, Erin. So I came home and I've been staring out my window of my desk and there's this invasive tree that's growing in our yard that Matt and I rent. And so we don't really know what the plan was with the landscaping in the backyard
Mhm.
when we moved in here, but it's clearly invasive because it's growing like a weed and it's like crowding out all of the other smaller bushes and
Mhm.
plants that are in the yard. And we've talked about sawing this thing down numerous times, but it's too big for me to do on my own. But I had all this energy and I was really pissed off. So I literally went and I just like hacked away at this thing with I don't know what the big trimmers are that
Yeah.
are, I
Like
can't remember what they're
shears,
called.
pruning
Loppers.
shears,
Loppers.
loppers.
I took the loppers out and I mean I took some big ass branches down. And just like, and then it like grew into this whole like ripping thistles out of the ground and like totally cleaning up the backyard, which this is kind of ironic, you guys, because if you haven't listened to episode 10, Lance is a tree guy. Like he's a plant and environment lover kind of. And so
Mhm.
here I am like very therapeutically and cathartically hacking away at this
Killing
tree in
it.
the backyard. And I usually will like put in a podcast or put on music in my earbuds when I'm outside working in the yard. And this was pure, just like nothing in my head except my own like mental cleanse of this
Mhm.
like just pissed off place that I came from. And it actually was very therapeutic. So I was like, it's kind of, it's yard work. It's
Mhm.
cutting down some tree branches that I've, wanted to do and it's cleaning up the yard, but it was like my therapy that day.
Mhm.
And I just thought it was kind of ironic that it was like related to trying to get rid of this tree when Lance is the tree guy. so
Right.
so yeah, very very mundane kind of thing, but it was like I felt so much better afterward. Hack away at
Nice.
a tree.
I
Yeah.
think that stuff is sometimes, a lot of times, yard work is very therapeutic. I think it's not always like angry, but still, hey, if it works, it
Yeah,
works,
this
right?
was a little angry, but at least I took it out on an invasive tree,
Yeah.
not myself.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm glad I helped because I know you were. And here's the thing: it's like I really didn't think it was that bad. I know, but I get it. Like if it was me, I would have been beating myself up too. I understand it, but from my perspective,
Yellow curry
yeah,
guy.
I very much
That
understand it.
and to me, I'm like, that's not a big deal, but
Oh, it was a big deal. So mine is from just 2 days ago. So we're in the middle of this process. Water's literally dripping from like our light fixture in our ceiling, right? It's just a mess, and I'm just pissed. I'm like frustrated that because the people we bought the house from in August, we found out they had this handyman do a lot of work who did not do a good job, and there was literally zero reason for this leak overflow thing to happen. He was just did a crappy job and didn't finish it really. Like the guy that came out this morning fixed it in about 15 minutes and
Oh,
it was 80
geez.
bucks. Like it was very simple thing, but now it's costing us thousands and thousands of dollars to fix, right? And so I'm just like, how are we going to pay for this? And, just frustrated and just mad. And I wasn't intentionally being a jerk, but I was being a jerk just in the house. I was just frustrated in my own head and cycling and being short with my kids and my
Yeah.
wife and snapping, and that kind of stuff. And so it's on Wednesday. So this is 3 days of me just being, and it was around, I think 4:30. And I had stopped working for a little bit to do something. And I started to walk back into my office here. And Kathleen was sitting in our dining room kind of across the entryway. And she was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I was like, "I'm going to go back to work for a little bit." She goes, "No, you need to be done." She said, "You need to stop and just go spend time with the girls." I was like, "All right, I guess, fine." Which is
Fine.
not
I'll
me. Like,
do
I
it.
love being with my kids, like I would so much rather be with them than working any day of the week. But I was like, all right, fine. Because she was kind of adamant. She's like, "You need to stop. Just be done for the day. There's nothing you have to do anymore. You know,
Yep.
just stop and go spend some time with them. Just like 15 minutes." So I was like, all right, let's go for a bike ride, So Lottie got on her bike and I put Sophie in a little carrier on the back of my bike. And we just rode around the neighborhood for maybe 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, something like that. And I came back and I felt infinitely better. Like I came back and I was joking
Yeah.
around and I was being silly and I was engaged with everybody. And, Kathleen was like, "Wow, you feel different, huh?"
The wife was right.
Yeah, she was, and I was like, "Yeah, I just feel so much lighter," and it was just a simple thing of spending time with my kids. We go on bike rides a lot. I spend a lot of time with them. I engage with them a lot. But it was this like, man, there's such beauty in connecting with someone who you really, really love in times that are really stressful, where they can just kind of like pull you out of it a bit. It may
Yeah.
not fix anything or solve anything or take it away, but it's just like it gets you kind of out of the mud and the muck a little bit to where you're like, okay, I can kind of breathe now. And this feels more doable. So it's just this really cool moment of, my wife being infinitely wiser than I am. And just a good reminder of like last week with the curry, chill out, man. It's going to be okay.
I know. Yeah. Like really, this isn't a crisis,
Yeah. Yeah.
This isn't,
So,
yeah.
yep.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, and personally, I think that time on a bicycle cures almost anything. So
Yeah, it was good. Just to be outside. You know what I mean?
I
Like I
know.
hadn't really been
Yeah.
outside in those 3 days. I was just like either working or staring at the ceiling, just getting more pissed off. I just stare at it,
Watching the amoeba grow on your
and
ceiling.
grumbling, like not doing anything, just staring at it. I'd walk upstairs and I'd come back down, it was just dumb. But yeah, so it helped a lot.
Yeah. Good. Good, good. Those
Yeah.
mundane therapeutic
Mm-hmm.
things.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
stuff. Well, I hope you
So
get your house fixed soon.
thanks. Yeah. We this morning we got the issue fixed, so there won't be any more leaking. So now it's just repair. So that actually
Good.
feels a lot better to
Good.
know like the problem's resolved. We just gotta, there's a lot of work ahead, but at least that's over. So that feels a lot better.
Okay.
Yeah. But
Good stuff. Well,
all right.
thank you everybody for
Mm-hmm.
listening
Thank you very
and
much.
for joining the ninja team. We're both wearing black today, so
Yep.
it was
So we're
not
like
planned.
super
But we're
sneaky,
like,
super
yeah,
stealth. Yeah.
yeah. Please subscribe. Please leave us a review, share with your friends. And we love questions and feedback. So you can email us at middleish@gmail.com.
Yep. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Okay, take care.